Right.
History Month. Speaking of Black History Month, we're going to talk about gender identity. I know they have nothing to do with each other, and I'm sorry because I probably offended somebody, rightfully so.
Right.
But apparently there was a recent lawsuit that you're going to inform us all about. But before we talk about lawsuit and how much money was lost, let's talk about how much money was gained. Guys, we don't do this show for free. It's out of our pocket expenses, but to offset that cost and make our lights running, we'd really appreciate a donation. You can do one time via PayPal. You can do monthly, which we'd really appreciate. You also can organically share it. That's one of the best ways to help us out. And also don't forget to follow, like, subscribe, and all that jazz. So, tell us about this case.
Yeah. Well, this is a case that I think you and I will both agree on. We don't agree on a lot of stuff about the Constitution, but I think this one.
That's not true. But go on.
But I think this particular case, which comes to us from campus reform, and I don't see the correspondent's name here. I wish I did. Oh yes, it's Corky M. Rose. Corky M. Rose. Rosemary Corkney, and she writes a very good article about this case. Now, the case involves a philosophy professor, and you know how dangerous those people can be, right?
Or inept.
Yeah, it involves a Swanee State University philosophy professor. Now, I don't even know where Swanee State, Swanee, how I love you, my dear old Swanee. It sounds like it's from Mississippi, but I don't even know where it is. Philosophy professor's lawsuit over the pronoun he used to address a student has been dismissed. Okay. Now, this professor, whose name is Nicholas Merriweather, he's a professed evangelical Christian. That's important for this case. This is a federal case, by the way. He was confronted on January 2018 by a student,
18.
Elena.
2 years ago.
Yes, 2 years ago, Elena Bruning, and Bruning identified as a transgender female. So obviously, from this rendering, Elena had a penis and testicles, but thought that.
Did you check?
No, but I'm saying, reading from the inferences that you can reasonably make from this script, Elena. Since it says identified as a transgender, didn't say they had the things chopped off, but it says identified. You can reasonably suppose that the penis and the testicles were still there. Identified as a transgender female and wanted to be addressed by the pronouns she, her, hers. When Merriweather refused to abide for this request, the lawsuit claims Bruning became belligerent and said, "Well, I guess that means I can call you a cunt." Okay? All right. So I think that's why the professor lost the case, if you want to know the truth.
Was there proof he said this?
In other words, this was agreed to in stipulation. In law cases, both sides can stipulate to agree on facts. So this was not a contested area of the law. Now, Merriweather reported the incident to the dean of students and the dean of the colleges. He said the professor could not compromise by addressing Bruning by the student's last name. Bruning threatened to launch a Title IX lawsuit, the student, against the professor. We know what that entails, demanding that the professor address the student by the preferred pronouns. According to the lawsuit, Merriweather has referred to all students in his classes by their last names and a title, Mr., Ms., Mrs., Miss, and as sir or ma'am. That's how he addresses everybody. Anyway, so what happened was this all winds up in a court of law, naturally, and the college naturally took the side of the self-identified transgender woman. Now, I'm going to skip down to the resolution of the case because I don't want to take up all of our time just arguing about this business. The judge, Susan Doit, U.S. District Court of Appeals, sided with SSU, I think that's Swanee State University, saying Merriweather, the professor, was not protected under the First Amendment. SSU now, no reasons are given for the judges in the article. There are no reasons given for the judge's decision. It simply goes on to say that the university spokesperson said that they were delighted and satisfied with the court ruling, but the American Defense for Freedom, which backed the professor, says this is wrong. Public universities have no business compelling people to express. And here's the rub that I want to talk to you about, Alex. Public universities, tax-funded universities, government colleges have no business compelling people to express ideological beliefs that they don't hold. In other words, this is a case for compelled speech. One of the guests that you set up for me on my Freedom Matters show, I forget her name, she was an attorney in Washington, D.C., and you put her on my show. She won a case, if you recall, on compelled speech. She won a case in district court, a different district court. So here's the question. Can a student who identifies in a fashion that the professor in a class would reasonably conclude that this violated that professor's conscience, religious or not? We'll take the religious thing off the table for a moment because it really is a matter of conscience. So what do you think, Alex? Does the university have the right to command that you as a professor must comply with calling a student whatever the student demands that you call that student?
Well, on one hand, the court ruled that way, so you could point out, well, that's just how the court at that you said appellate.
No, it's a district court.
Okay, that the district court ruled. Now, my understanding of the Constitution and the First Amendment indicates otherwise. But, I haven't gone to law school, and I don't, have all this fancy schmancy degrees and experience and all that stuff. But there's this one part that just gets me in the Constitution. It says, you have freedom of speech. Like, oh man, that's really hard to get work around. The shoe can be on the other foot if the professor demands that a student refer to him as a duck. The professor doesn't have the right to compel that student to that speech,
right?
Especially if it's a government school.
Right.
There's a whole different variety of ways we could do it. The question, I think, really boils down to who is doing the compelling, who is forcing who to do what. From what it sounds.
Yeah, go ahead.
From what it sounds like, the student is requesting the professor do X, which is
demanding.
Yes. And so the burden of proof, I think, falls on the student. Is that expectation or demand a infraction of the Constitution?
Right.
That's the basic. That's the question. If I were a lawyer in this case, that's how I would frame this question. If I cared about the Constitution, if I'm trying to advance trans rights and I didn't really care about the Constitution, then I guess I would side with her.
Right.
What do you think?
Well,
this sounds pretty cut and dry from a conservative perspective.
Well, I know, but I think it could be argued both ways. You may find it surprising, but I actually think the student has a case.
And how so?
And let me explain why. Meriwether, the professor, he responded by saying that true. Now, this is dispositive. True tolerance must be a two-way street. Now, the professor says, I always address my students professionally and with dignity, based upon what I see and what I perceive of that student. Now the district court suggests that professors have no free speech rights, which should trouble us all, because now we are compelled to use speech with which we disagree. Okay? Now that's a very strong argument to me, and that's the argument you just made. That's the argument you just made, and the professor agrees. I'm going to take the student's case on this one, and I'm going to argue that the student has the right to be respected as a matter of courtesy and as a matter of deference. Remembering that students, they're beginning their life cycle, they're not fully formed, they're still struggling to deal with a lot of things. And if a student came to me and said, I want you to refer to me as Cleopatra, you'd probably
think it's one of your children that you made without knowing.
They are children. My point is they are children. They are children. Students are children, because otherwise, what are they doing in the university? When you go to a university, you're there because you're stupid and you're ignorant of that which you are studying. You don't know.
Is that why you spent over 20 years teaching that? Over 50 years teaching at a university?
I taught children for 23 years. Yeah, I taught other people's children how to become adults. I tried to nurture them to become adults.
Well, what does this have to do with her case?
Well, I think that the professor made a mistake in standing on standing on the fact that he would not allow the students to be addressed the way that the student wanted to be. Because I think he could have made that into a great teaching moment. He could have said, what if you demanded that I call you Cleopatra, the Pharaoh of Egypt? Are you the Pharaoh of Egypt?
No, because she doesn't identify that way. But if she did identify that way, she would be.
But he could have opened up a whole discussion about the insanity and the stupidity of self-identifying and then compelling other people to cooperate with that.
It sounds like you're taking my position with extra steps. You're ultimately taking my position, but with extra steps. We're running out of time here. I'll give you like 20 seconds to close out.
No, I am. I'm taking both sides of this case.
There you have it, guys. Okay, man, I was expecting a climax here.
What do you think? I mean, what does the fans think? What do the people who listen to us think?
We'd love to hear what you think.
By the way, I ran into 2 people who listen to us religiously, but they haven't sent us any money yet.
Okay, well, I love you too, but send us money. Yeah, okay, bye. I identify as a rich person. Make it a reality, or I'll sue.